Hey everybody, this is Dr. Osborne, and we're here with Dr. Brian Mole today. This is our first Facebook Live. I'm happy to kind of join the technology age with all of you folks and bring some great information to you. I've got Dr. Mole on today because he's got a very, very wonderful upcoming diabetes summit where they're talking all about blood sugar control. They're talking about the connection between autoimmune disease, nutritional deficiencies, what you can do, what you should be doing with your diet and lifestyle to take power back over your life and really, really dial in your blood sugar and get healthy again. So thanks for being with us today, Dr. Mole. It's great to have you on. Let's dive in. Tell us a little bit about the summit and what you've got coming up.
Yeah, great. Excited to be on with you. And hey, real quick, I noticed a couple people saying they don't have any sound. Best thing to do there is just close it out and open it back up, and you should be able to hear us because I know we're coming through. So, but yeah, Diabetes Summit is coming up. It starts on Monday the 20th, so that's this upcoming Monday. And really excited. This is our fourth year doing it, and we took kind of a deep dive this year into a variety of different topics. And a little bit more attention on type 1 diabetes this year. A lot of focus on autoimmune, which is really what you and I talked about. And that was something that was really interesting to me. And not just autoimmune diabetes like type 1 or the latent autoimmune diabetes of adulthood or LADA, but really the connection between autoimmune disease and inflammation and how that can affect blood sugar even with people with type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome and prediabetes. So that was a big focus this year. And then the other one that seemed to come up over and over again was toxins and toxic exposure, all the different toxins that we experience in our environment and how those can contribute to diabetes as well. So,
So I'm glad to hear you say toxins. Toxins is a big issue. And on that note, I really wanted to get your kind of take today, if you could, on toxins related to artificial sweeteners. Because you know what we see, and a lot of people know this. Maybe listening, maybe they're already avoiding aspartame, NutraSweet, sucralose, and the different types of sweeteners. But can you talk a little bit about their toxicity and how they actually don't help control blood sugar and don't actually help people, really, really, truly regulate their diabetes?
Yeah, I'm still surprised when I encounter people who use artificial sweeteners. It's one of those things that I felt like we put to rest a long time ago, but clearly we haven't. It's part of mainstream conventional diabetes advice is to use artificial sweeteners to replace sugar with artificial sweeteners, which is, I think, just a disaster. It's a horrible idea. And what happens is they're chemicals that were never made for human consumption. Most of them were discovered accidentally, trying to do something else. And it, unfortunately, they ended up getting approved for human consumption, for human use, food additives. And, like aspartame or NutraSweet is I think the number one complained about food to the FDA, food additive, because of all the different problems it causes, from seizures to headaches to, even potentially cancer. So, these are major problems. Now, when it comes to blood sugar and diabetes, a couple of the big issues with artificial sweeteners is, number one, it stimulates that sweet craving. So, when you eat something that tastes sweet, it stimulates your appetite. And so you want to eat more, particularly if it doesn't have any calories attached to it. So when we're eating something sweet, our brain is expecting some sort of energy from it. And when we're eating these, the only thing I like about them is they call them non-nutritive, which is very true. They have no nutritional value whatsoever. And in fact, they are really dangerous and harmful to the body. So it stimulates it stimulates your appetite. It stimulates sugar and carbohydrate cravings. But I think really the biggest issue is that it just, it destroys the microbiome of the gut. So these chemicals basically tear apart the gut, destroy the microbiome, which we're finding out more and more is intimately connected to metabolism, to the hormone insulin and insulin sensitivity, and other hormones like ghrelin and leptin, which control hunger. And the list goes on and on. You could look at neurotransmitters like GABA and serotonin and so forth, but it has an effect on this whole cascade of hormones and neurotransmitters, which short circuits our metabolism. We eat more, we gain more weight, we become more insulin resistant. So the point of eating artificial sweeteners for most people is to lose weight or to somehow keep their blood sugar down by not eating sugar. And at the end of the day, it has the opposite effect. So I don't recommend eating them. And then who knows really what the long-term consequences of these chemicals are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I actually just finished reading that study on microbiome disruption. It's actually now been confirmed in humans as well as rodents.
Yeah.
And what comes to mind for me is not even like the diet sodas and not even necessarily like the foods that are being promoted for diabetics. It's toothpaste and mouthwash and chewing gum, and
that's right.
It's found in all these different products, and people don't even realize it. I've actually seen it in lipstick. So that women want to put the lipstick on and it tastes good, so that when they lick their lips and get all that toxic petroleum into their body, they're also getting a little bit of toxic artificial sweetener in there as well. Might as well make it a double, right? But yeah, it's really not something that I recommend, and I'm glad you pointed that out. Have you seen anything about? You mentioned microbiota, and it just disrupts the gut. Have you seen anything directly on leaky gut, like studies that show that it actually causes an intestinal permeability or a leaky gut contributing to or increasing the risk for autoimmunity?
I haven't, but it wouldn't surprise me, and of course it's in a secondary way. If it's disrupting the microbiome, that's certainly going to throw off the the balance, the ecology of the gut, which can lead to leaky gut. I haven't seen anything specifically to that end, but again, other toxins have, and it wouldn't surprise me if the artificial sweeteners do. And there's so many good alternatives. I mean, I don't necessarily recommend eating sweet things anyway, but if you want a little bit of sweetness, then use stevia, because stevia actually has health benefits. And there's studies that show that stevia can help pancreatic function. There's evidence that stevia can improve insulin sensitivity. It's an herb, right? So, hey, Dr. Galazon, that's great. There's another diabetes expert. And stevia has some health properties. Now, again, I don't recommend overloading your food with any sweet flavor, because no matter where it comes from, sweet taste is going to stimulate appetite. So we have to be a little bit careful with that.
So stevia, let's talk about, stevia from a perspective of not being a chemical and not being like a major neurotoxin. It's okay, but what I hear you saying is it's still stimulative to hunger. In essence, it's still going to make a person hungry. What about other artificial, or not artificial, but natural sweeteners, kind of the lohan or the monk fruit? You've got people, diving into the agave nectar and coconut sugar and all these other different types of kind of newer sweeteners that are coming in. What do you think about those? Are there any of those that are maybe better, worse, kind of maybe a gradient or scale? Can you kind of say which ones you recommend if somebody really wants to have something sweet?
Sure. I kind of put them on a scale, like you said, and at the one end, we have the artificial sweeteners like NutraSweet, Splenda aspartame, acesulfame potassium. What else is saccharin? Those are sort of the bad guys. And then at the other end is stevia. And I put stevia at the top of the list because, again, there are studies that show benefits. Lohan or monk fruit extract, I would put right there with it. I think that's a great non-caloric, natural, extract sweetener. So it's, I haven't seen anything negative about that. And then And then we get into like the sugar alcohols. And sugar alcohols, I think we have to be a bit more careful of. They're fine for most people. Different sugar alcohols have different properties. So erythritol, which starts with an E, basically has no calories and no net effect on blood sugar. It's very minimal. That's about the only one, though. The other ones like xylitol and sorbitol, maltitol, malitol, those do have an effect on blood sugar, and they do have calories. It's about half the effect of sucrose, but still have an effect. So we have to be a bit careful with those. We can't just go eat as much, xylitol, for example, as we want. It also can disrupt the GI tract, causes a lot of gas and bloating for certain people, gets fermented in weird ways in some people. So I think we have to be a little bit careful with that. Erythritol supposedly does not get metabolized in the gut. Not my favorite, but it's probably the best of the bunch. I don't recommend for people who do not have diabetes, who do not have any blood sugar problems or blood sugar dysregulation. I think things like honey and maple syrup in moderation can be fine and actually even be healthy. But if you have diabetes, if you have blood sugar issues and you're glucose intolerant, which is another word for prediabetes or diabetes, then I really don't recommend using any high impact sugars like that, because they're going to raise your blood sugar. And it's like somebody who's gluten intolerant eating a little bit of gluten. It's generally not a good idea. So if you're glucose intolerant, if you've already lost control of your blood sugar, I don't recommend eating any concentrated sources of sugar. Now, you mentioned agave. Agave is a high fructose product, and that can be particularly troublesome. One of the challenges with agave, or one of the confusing points, is that it's low glycemic. So are apples, because they're high in fructose. So they're low on the glycemic scale, and some people will say, well, geez, I guess that's a good option then. Because fructose does not directly raise blood sugar. Glucose is what we're measuring when we measure blood sugar, and fructose does not directly raise blood sugar. However, it does go straight to the liver and get processed there, and oftentimes will raise triglycerides and will sort of inhibit metabolic function in high doses. So a little bit of fructose, of course, in fruit is fine, but we don't really want to do things that are very high in fructose, and agave is high in fructose. So I actually like, stevia, lohan, and then the next choice would probably be that erythritol. Really, any other sweeteners after that, I would probably avoid.
Okay. I would add too to that, with fructose issues, I see a lot when I test patients in the clinic with copper deficiency. As copper's a requirement for fructose metabolism in the liver. So a lot of patients who aren't getting their adequate quantity of dark greens in their diet on a daily basis, they're really not getting a good source of copper if they're not eating a lot of greens or organ meats, are going to have a harder time and become almost like, instead of we call it glucose intolerance, but then I've seen people become fructose intolerant. Yeah. And that's just another ballgame altogether, because if you're basing your recommendations off of their glucose labs or their hemoglobin A1C labs, then you might miss the boat on the fructose piece. So I'll just chime in with that. I want to pull up a question. Doc Gala, he's coming at us with what are our top hacks, tips, and secrets that we've developed over the years to help people reduce their sweet tooth altogether. I'm going to let you have a crack at that one.
That's a great question. And Doc, I'd love to have you chime in too. So, even though we can't get you on live, after we give our answers, maybe you could give your answer. But I would say there's a few things. I love this idea of taste quality. So in Ayurvedic medicine, they describe 6 taste qualities, and those are sweet, sour, salt, bitter, and then astringent and pungent. Those are the 6 taste qualities. And some of these are stimulating to appetite, and others are suppressive to appetite, as well as craving for sweets. So the ones that are the most stimulating, as you might imagine, are sweet and salt. So I'm not against salt per se, but many of you, I'm sure, have noticed when you eat salt, you want to eat more. And bars and restaurants know this, of course, and food manufacturers know this, of course, and that's why most foods are loaded up with sodium and salt to make you want to eat more. The foods that are the most suppressive are bitter foods. So bitter foods as well as pungent foods. So bitter and pungent foods. And I'll give you an example. Pungent, a lot of people, because we're not, our Western diet is typically lacking in pungent and astringent taste qualities. So pungent is basically spice. It's things like turmeric is a classic pungent flavor. Also, cinnamon, interestingly, is a pungent flavor. Anything, like a hot pepper is classified in the pungent range. So mustard is a classic pungent flavor. So those flavors, again, mustard and turmeric or curry flavor, will suppress appetite, as will bitter. So long answer to a short question, but what I like to use is bitter tasting foods. So spinach is a good example, or any leafy green. Dark chocolate, interestingly, is very bitter as long as there's not a lot of, as long as there's not much sugar added to it. If it's sort of a really like a 85-90% cocoa, or those little cacao nibs, which is, the cacao just ground up. Those are very bitter, and you can chew on some of those, and that will actually suppress your appetite. I like to just chew on, I'll clean spinach now that it's on the dirty dozen list. I'll clean spinach real good, and then I just chew on some spinach leaves. Doesn't sound all that appealing, but just chewing on spinach leaves actually suppresses the appetite, and you get some good nutrition in there also. Black coffee or black tea are bitter. So what do we do typically with bitter? We take the bitter out in the Western world with salt and sweet, right? So we add sugar to our coffee, we add salt to our greens, which is okay, but we actually want to taste that bitter, because the bitter is what suppresses the appetite, and there is evidence that bitter quality of the food seems to have an effect on blood sugar. It actually seems to lower blood sugar, which is interesting. One other tip I'll give is glutamine. Actually, I'll give two other quick ones. Glutamine powder, which you can mix in water. It's really good for gut health. You can take some of that and put it right on the tongue, and it has typically a carbohydrate and sugar craving suppressing effect. So it stops sugar cravings and carbohydrate cravings. I don't find that works if you're like really in the midst of a strong food addiction. Like if you really want a candy bar or a soda and you're trying to break through those foods, or even bread, and like you're right in the middle of that, and you're like, I need some bread, I don't find putting a little glutamine powder on your tongue is going to be enough to overcome that. So you're going to have to find some willpower there. But it can help for more mild sugar and carb cravings. And then the third one I'll give is there's an Indian herb called Gymnema sylvestre, and it's Gymnema, Gymnema. And it comes in capsules, typically 400 milligram capsules. You can take those internally. They're really good for blood sugar health, and they support pancreatic function. You can also take the dry herb out of the capsule and put it right on your tongue. And in India, it's called the sugar destroyer because it actually suppresses sugar cravings. So, but again, you kind of have to taste the herb, and it does have a bitter taste to it, but tasting that herb on the tongue seems to stop sugar cravings also.
Excellent tips, excellent advice. I'll add one that's nothing to do with food, actually, too. Water. A lot of times when people are fidgeting and wanting to eat, they're bored and they're not hungry, and they tend to gravitate toward easy, quick, convenient, which is typically sweet and salty. And so drinking a big glass of water is a great appetite suppressant. The other thing that I would recommend that has nothing to do with putting anything in your mouth is actually exercise. Take a walk.
Yeah.
Drop to the floor, do 10 push-ups, do some jumping jacks, do some exercise. Exercise actually has appetite suppressing qualities as well. The body does not want to activate the gut and the blood flow to the gut if we're actually trying to activate the blood flow to the muscles. So it reverses kind of the nature of the way the blood's flowing through the body and tells the body, hey, no food right now. We don't want to digest because we're trying to exercise.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that is, so I talked about when you're in the midst of a food addiction or food craving, and that's really about the best thing. I'm so glad you mentioned that, is change of scenery and go out and get some exercise. You start to stimulate blood flow, like you said, stimulate the exercise, and oftentimes you'll break right through those cravings. Awesome.
We got a few more questions coming in. Let's just post them up here. Jonathan Holly Starrett, I hope I said your name right. Is there a way to reboot your body and get rid of the autoimmune disease altogether? That's kind of a big question, right? Yes, the answer is yes. All autoimmune diseases are reversible. In most cases, I think there are a few, like type 1 diabetes, where if the damage is extensive enough, you don't really get it to reverse. In most cases, you don't get it to reverse. You can get insulin under better control. You can definitely reduce the need for insulin, but I would not say it's 100% reversible. Although there's some newer studies showing reversing of type 1 diabetes. I don't think we can make that claim for that particular autoimmune disease, but in my experience with virtually every other form of autoimmune disease, yes, reversible if you reset the body, reboot the body. And there are some fundamental things that have to be done. Blood sugar control is one of them. Exercise, the right diet, eliminating food allergies, cleaning up the gut, eliminating environmental toxins, making sure there are no hidden or stealth-based infections. These are all important aspects of getting rid of autoimmune disease. Brian, you got any additional comments on that one?
I would just say that you and I did talk quite a bit about that. I mean, that's really what our interview was on. So, if you really, not to just be a promotion machine here, but if you really want to learn the details of that, I would definitely tune in. It's free, and you check it out, register, and certainly want to watch. We're on day 3, Doc, of the summit, which will be Wednesday. So definitely want to tune into that and check out Dr. Osborne's interview. It was an awesome interview.
Well, thanks for the plug on me. I'm going to put that link in there for people who can who haven't registered. And by the way, folks, this is a free event. There's no charge. It's all just done graciously on behalf of our communities in functional medicine. We're just trying to get information out there to empower people. So make sure you take advantage of that very, very free and generous service Dr. Moll's put together for you. We got another question coming in. Anita, recently I've been told I'm insulin resistant. Any tips? Does this mean I'm pre-diabetic?
That's a great question, Anita. And I would like to differentiate between prediabetes and insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is most of the time, we can't say all the time, but most of the time at the root of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. But it is different. So diabetes is specific to blood sugar as far as how it's diagnosed. Now, I have some differing opinions on really what diabetes is all about, but from a medical diagnostic standpoint, it's based on blood sugar. So once your blood sugar, and there's another test called hemoglobin A1C, which is basically a surrogate for blood sugar. Excuse me. So once your blood sugar goes over 100, but it's under 126 on a fasting lab test. So you go into a lab, have a blood draw done fasting first thing in the morning. When it's over 100 and under 126, you're considered pre-diabetic. Basically just means you're on your way to type 2 diabetes. Not everybody progresses, about 60% will, but typically you're on your way. Now, when I look at pre-diabetes, to me, that is a problem already. So if your blood sugar is already over 100, then you've lost, to a certain degree, good blood sugar control, and that needs to be addressed right away. But it's not considered diabetes till it goes over this magical number of 126. Once it hits that number and goes above that, then you're considered type 2 diabetic. As far as A1C tests, which some of you listening may have had, the cutoff is 5.7. You go 5.7 to 6.4 is pre-diabetes, and then once it hits 6.5 on a hemoglobin A1C test, it's diagnosed as type 2 diabetes. Now, insulin resistance, as I said, is usually what's underlying that, not 100% of the time, but usually. What happens in insulin resistance is your cells, particularly in the liver and also in the muscle cells, if you're not active, become insulin resistant. They become desensitized to the hormone insulin. Insulin is a hormone that puts glucose from your bloodstream into your cells, like liver cells and brain cells and organ cells, to be burned for fuel. So we need insulin. It's like a key that unlocks the door, basically, to the cell. Once that door is open, the glucose can come in and it gets burned for energy. So if the key doesn't work, if the lock has been gummed up in a way, it's called the receptor site, then we become insulin resistant. And the big issue is what the body does in response to that is makes more insulin. So we have insulin resistance, which can come from a lot of the things we've already talked about: toxicity, sedentary lifestyle, poor diet, stress, lack of good quality sleep, gut issues, you name it. So a lot of these things can lead to insulin resistance. Once you're insulin resistant, just like if you have a hard time hearing and the people around you might want to start talking louder, the body wants to start talking louder. So it does that by making more insulin. So our blood insulin levels rise. We become what's called hyperinsulinemic, or have too much insulin, over-insulinized. And high levels of insulin lead to weight gain, inflammation, fluid retention, and they basically tear up the cardiovascular system and the brain. So this is connected to dementia and Alzheimer's disease, to heart attack and stroke, kidney dysfunction, blindness, and poor circulation and poor wound healing. So all of the complications that you typically hear about from high blood sugar can also be caused, and I think maybe even more so caused, by elevated insulin levels. So when you are insulin resistant, as you mentioned, again, kind of a long answer to a short question, but hopefully there's some good nuggets in there. When you're insulin resistant, don't look at that as pre-diabetes, like not a big deal. Oh, if I just, make a few changes, I'll be okay. Insulin resistance in and of itself is a huge deal, and it's a big problem. And it can, because of the elevated insulin levels, can cause you to store a lot of fat around your organs, which can eventually become diabetes. But even if it doesn't, it can still cause dementia and Alzheimer's disease. It can cause cardiovascular stress, lead to heart attacks and strokes. It can cause kidney problems. It can cause high blood pressure from fluid retention. So we want to get the body more insulin sensitive.
Yeah, well said. I would add to that simply that nutrition, there's some critical nutrition elements for those who have had that diagnosis of insulin sensitivity issues or insulin resistance. Is one, that vitamin D deficiency is a major trigger for insulin resistance. The pancreas is full of vitamin D receptors, and that's part of how we actually, basically communicate to the pancreas about how much insulin is needed. There was a question that came through about vitamin D, so I'm throwing that in to answer that question as well. If you are vitamin D deficient, you can become insulin resistant. If you correct your vitamin D deficiency and then you become vitamin D deficient again, you are just as much at risk for redeveloping insulin resistance again. That's kind of where that question was coming from. But then you also want to realize that a lot of people with insulin resistance don't get enough chromium in their diet because sugar causes chromium wasting. It also causes magnesium wasting. So you lose sugar, or rather you lose chromium and magnesium with increased sugar in the diet, which is common for diabetics. So chromium is actually, its nickname is the GTF, the glucose tolerance factor. It makes and builds the insulin receptors on the surface of our cells that communicate with insulin about getting sugar from your blood into your cells. So if you don't have adequate chromium, even if you're doing everything else right. I've seen full-blown diabetes in healthy individuals because they were doing everything else right, but they were so severely chromium deficient that they couldn't regulate their blood sugar. So you can have your doctor measure your chromium level as well. That would be a smart start, I think, to getting an answer as to why the insulin resistance is there, outside of taking note of the changes that you need to make in your diet and lifestyle. Let's see, Thaddeus is chiming in again. Let's see here. What has he got to this time? After approximately 2 weeks, the brain and body will boost up to 90% beta oxidation, burning fat versus burning sugar for energy. I have found that clinically that increasing satiety by eating quality protein and fat will help reduce cravings and help people shed the weight and burn the fat when given time for the body to adapt. Excellent, excellent. So we didn't even talk about ketogenic diets.
We didn't.
Or ketosis when we were talking about all that. And so I'm glad he's on, because that's like a really, really big one, and really, really great way to reduce your cravings for sugar is to increase your protein and fat and go and put your body into beta oxidation, which is fat burning mode, which will help you with weight loss, but will also help you with those cravings. And it's also a great way. It's a cancer killer, because it basically doesn't allow cancer cells to get access to sugar very well. So if you've been told potentially that you have a cancer or that you're at risk for cancer, this is this type of diet may be the right kind of diet, at least maybe not permanently, but temporarily, to help you naturally and through your diet kind of fight that. So thanks again for chiming in, Doc. Good to have you on with us.
Yeah, man.
Okay. Let's see. We got one more question I think we can get to before we wrap it up. Sue Keener is asking, once a 50-year-old man has been told his ED, and I'm going to assume ED is erectile dysfunction, is due to diabetics, can it be reversed? Sorry if this is not an okay. No, Sue, it's perfectly fine. ED is a very real problem.
It is.
Brian, you want to handle that? You want to tackle that one?
Yeah, sure. I have seen ED reversed in people with diabetes. So ED typically comes from one of three things. It's high blood sugar, uncontrolled blood sugar, blood pressure issues, or hormone imbalance. Those are typically the three things. And ultimately, when we look at blood pressure and blood sugar, it's circulation. So the circulation is affected. And so we have to turn those around. Now, when we look at problems like ED, and we can say the same thing about any type of peripheral vascular disease. So that could be peripheral neuropathy, it could be PAD, peripheral arterial disease in the leg, lower leg, or foot. Now, there are some cases like with PAD, sometimes you can have a blockage in the calf or something, but there are cases where it's more centralized and it's due to poor circulation, or that's a contributing factor. When we see those related to diabetes, it can be reversed, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take quite a bit of time usually. So what I see with peripheral neuropathy, with things like erectile dysfunction, is this can be years rather than weeks or months. So the key is, number one, you fix the root causes. So you get your blood sugar normalized, get your blood sugar into the 80s, and get your, not just fasting, you have to look at your post-meal blood sugars too. They need to be under 120 for sure. So your post-meal blood sugars, your hemoglobin A1C should be down, but certainly below 5.7. It'd be better to be in the lower fives, around 5.5 or so. So the first step is to do everything you need to do to normalize your blood sugar levels. Because even if you've already progressed to erectile dysfunction from diabetes, and you're walking around with an average blood sugar of like 120 or 130, it's going to be really hard for those areas to heal enough to get rid of that problem. So you really have to normalize your blood sugar, and it can be done. Secondly, you want to normalize your blood pressure. So do everything you can to improve cardiovascular health. Your endothelium, which is the lining on your blood vessels, will die off and be replaced just like the skin on your arm. So we're going to get a new endothelium the question is, are we going to keep beating it up or not? And so we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to reduce inflammation and to improve the health of our vascular system. Things like vitamin K are really important. Other fat-soluble vitamins. There's things like hawthorn extract that you can use to improve vascular health, and there's a lot of tips that we probably can't get into today. But that's what you want to do, is improve vascular health, blood pressure, blood sugar, and then the third thing that I mentioned is hormone balance, particularly DHEA and testosterone. So you want to check those levels, make sure the testosterone and DHEA levels are not just adequate, but optimal. So up in that optimal range. And if they're not, then, you do what you need to do to get your testosterone levels to increase. Strength training, muscle building, resistance. Make sure you're eating some good red meat, which can stimulate good quality grass-fed red meat, which can stimulate it. Make sure your cholesterol is not suppressed. A lot of people with testosterone issues are walking around on statin drugs, and their cholesterol is like 130, and they're wondering why their testosterone and DHEA levels are low. We need good cholesterol to make those hormones, so make sure your cholesterol levels are optimal. I like the cholesterol right around 200 for good hormone production. So, and then, there's other things like maca root and tribulus and so forth that you can also do herbal to improve testosterone. But so those are the three areas to focus on. Again, the good news is, yes, it can be turned around. We've had many cases of people reverse ED. Last thing I'll mention is there can be some other physical issues, prostate problems, for example, and other physical manifestations that have nothing to do with blood sugar, blood pressure, or hormone. They're more again physical in nature. But barring any of those, it can absolutely be reversed.
Yeah, I think those are great points. I would add to that. I love what you said about cholesterol. We see, if we look at the history of statins, we see in the last 30, 40 years, we see such an aggressive policy on lowering cholesterol, and simultaneously we see the mass exodus of testosterone centers popping up everywhere, like low T centers popping up everywhere. And there is definitely a correlation between testosterone suppression and taking statins. So if you're a man listening and you're having an ED problem and you're on a statin, it's a very real possibility that statin is contributing to low testosterone, which is contributing to ED. Statins also cause CoQ10 deficiency, which elevate blood pressure and cause vasospasm, so it will reduce blood flow to the penis. So you've got to have, you've got to know those things. You've got to have a doctor who's willing to maybe not use statins with you, or maybe look at, okay, maybe that's not the best choice for you. Maybe that's not the best option for you. I would add zinc as a supplement. You cannot make testosterone without zinc. Zinc is kind of the centerpiece, the mineral that holds testosterone together and generates your body's ability to produce it. So make sure you're eating. That's where that red meat comes in. You're eating foods that are higher in zinc. And you can even get your doctor to test your zinc levels and make sure that's not one of the reasons why your testosterone is low. Good stuff. I think the questions just keep coming.
Well, I'll hop on and answer a lot of these too. So we'll,
okay.
Even after the Facebook Live, I'll go through and answer as many as I can.
Okay, great. Let's wrap it up with one more, and then we'll call it a day. Let's see here. This one's on refractory celiac disease. Hi, I have refractory celiac. I'm on high dose of steroids to kick the body to action. Is there something I can do to help myself with feeling tired all the time? I'm going to assume that's what that means. Tina, I would say if you've got refractory celiac disease, you need to pick up a copy of No Grain, No Pain, and you need to read it yesterday, because I've dealt with literally thousands of cases of refractory celiac, and I have found that almost always it's because they're following a traditional gluten-free diet and not a true gluten-free diet. A true gluten-free diet is the elimination of all grain, not just wheat, barley, and rye, which is what most celiac diets consist of. And that refractory is because the corn gluten or the rice gluten is continuing to do damage to your GI tract and creating a malabsorption and a nutritional deficiency state that will cause chronic fatigue. Steroids will not cure that. Steroids will actually, over the long haul, potentiate liver damage, and they'll potentiate bone loss, and they'll potentiate other major problems like vitamin D deficiency and calcium deficiency that can lead you down a much worse road. I've actually seen steroids given for refractory celiac disease cause autoimmune hepatitis. You don't want to end up with liver autoimmune disease too. So again, get a good copy of No Grain, No Pain. Go read it and check that out, because I think if you make some diet changes, you'll find that you respond much better to the gluten-free diet in a true form.
Nice.
Okay. Well, let's wrap it up because I've got another meeting I've got to hit. But I love this, man. This is my first Facebook Live.
So much fun, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks
so
for coercing me into this thing, right? Let's remember everyone to register for Dr. Moll's Diabetes Summit. Is your fifth one?
Yeah, fourth year.
Excellent. Hopefully we get some people over there and get access to that information, because a lot of the questions that we weren't able to get to, I know there's some great speakers that you've got lined up to answer a lot of these questions.
Yeah,
too.
if you guys like this stuff, you're going to love the summit. It's this, on, magnified by 30. So Dr. Osborne's interview is phenomenal, and we have another 30 experts that are kind of right on the same page. So you guys will love it. It's all free. Go register.
All right. Dr. Moll, thanks so much. Love having you on and getting
Likewise,
to
brother.
chat and having you share your expertise with our audience. And folks, thanks so much for breaking my Facebook Live virginity. This is number one for me. So had a great time, and we're going to look forward to doing more of these. So take care, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hello?